So in the last video, I left off having had about all I could take of working in a clean, organized fashion. I've now started working on a new stack of layers on top, basically treating all of my organized, masked ones as though the whole Photoshop file had been flattened up to this point. I do, however, keep them around because I can still create selections based on those masks by control-clicking the layer. If I want to, say, paint only on the area around orc, but these will become less and less useful the more we stray away from them as we make more bold decisions and crazy changes to the whole of the illustration. Usually at this point, the first thing I do is I hit my illustration with a color balance adjustment layer. Adjustment layers are very useful because, like the layer masks, which they actually use, they're non-destructive. You can paint in and out the areas where they affect everything beneath them using black and white and even grays to get some effect, just like you would on the layer masks that we used previously. I like using color balance because it allows me to push the shadows, midtones, and highlights of my illustration in a few different directions and generally helps to unify my color palette a little. It makes for a strong starting point for this phase of polish, so it's definitely something that I recommend that you check out. It can let you get a little bit too crazy, especially if you mess with the little checkbox, preserve luminosity or something like that, but it's still worth experimenting with. Now that we've broken away from all the rigidity of the previous phases, I'm free to add little details that I might have otherwise lost. Little tufts of fur or grass or balls of spit, etc. They're all things that are likely too troublesome to maintain earlier on in the process, and they tend to get lost when you're doing them in that earlier phase. But now that we're reaching the end, that's not really a concern anymore. So you can kind of, have at it and add the little bits of fur, little pieces of dust and stuff, and you're not really going to be in a position where they're going to get destroyed. Now, just because we're reaching the end doesn't mean that we're locked into any decision that we've made thus far. Every major change that we want to make is certainly going to cost, but being bold and willing to jump into those alterations is often worth it. In some cases, certain major changes can even be easier to do now, especially with the lack of layer restrictions. So here, I started to notice that the composition was starting to feel a little bit tight, and that the lion's paw was uncomfortably close to the edge. I also felt that the focal point of Orc's shoulder was getting a little too close to the center, and I wanted to pull it more to the right. The solution here was to extend the whole canvas a little bit on the left side. It seems like a daunting task since, we've been building up this whole illustration within these specific confines, but it really wasn't too bad. It was just a matter of extending similar colors and shapes and working from top to bottom, gradually pushing the same kind of colors over to the side and extending it out that way. It's a lot like the way that Photoshop's content aware fill works, in that it looks at the surrounding area and just makes some stuff up. It really doesn't take that long for a human brain to work through that process, so it's really not as big of a deal as it might seem. You can make these kinds of bold changes with major focal areas too. Extending the canvas actually didn't end up being a big problem because none of those objects were particularly important. They weren't focal points, no one was really looking at them, so if we make little mistakes or oversimplify them, it's not a big deal, and it's frankly better that way because they don't draw your attention. But what if we found out that our gnome just feels a little bit too big and is demanding a little bit too much attention? Well, we just put him in his place and we make him smaller. I've done this by grabbing him with the lasso tool, using copy merge, Control Shift C, paste in place, Control Shift V, and transforming this new layer. Of course, I had to paint over some bits to fix some of the problems that inevitably arose around the seams of this new chunk that we've popped in there. But again, be bold. Don't be afraid to make big changes, even if there's going to be some problems that you need to deal with as a result. Grabbing chunks and transforming them like this at any point in the workflow is one of the strongest aspects of working digitally, so take advantage of it. And that's pretty much it. I hope these videos have helped shed some light on some of the useful techniques that I've learned along the way, and I hope you'll be able to apply them in your own illustrations.